No sun means no light. No light means no plants. No plants means I have to bend myself backwards to find nutrients I need to stay alive. As almost everything that was living before the cataclysm turned into a grand heap of dying afterward, the fungal population exploded through the roof. Same with cold winds that kicked the snow and ash around also gave lift to spores, and mystically large mushrooms spread thickly outward from the deepest caves of Equestria, no longer food for subterranean beasts and with no forested walls to impede their progress. If, when I was younger, I knew that someday I would be flying over an endless wasteland subsisting entirely on a diet of mold and mushrooms, I would have gagged myself to death. In many ways, I still do, but it's what I have to do to acquire the energy I need to live. But energy isn't everything. In a green world vibrant with life, ponies could afford to grow beans, potatoes, carrots, and all sorts of plentiful plants that a healthy diet required. Here, in the realm of oblivion, I've had to do away with conventional pony agriculture, and also, as I would soon discover, I would have to do away with conventional pony ethics. Marching backwards towards the Harmony with saddlebags full of mushroom bits, the Pegasus froze. There was a vicious stirring of movement up ahead. Crouching low, the last pony crawled her way through a field of fungal stalks and peered over a mound of flaking dirt. She reached a hoof up and adjusted the lenses of her goggles. Several meters ahead, blurring into focus, was a full adult cougar with tattered fur. It snarled and hissed, digging its jaws into the scrumptious tendrils of a dead vampire bat caught in its maw. Tearing the wing off of its prey to expose more tender muscles, it was briefly oblivious to the four-hoofed survivor spying on it from several snow flurries away. With a deep breath, the pony shook her flank sideways. Her brass rifle slid loose from its sheath, and she caught it. With a gentle and silent precision, the pony extended the long, shiny barrel, pulled the levers out, and loaded in a cold magazine of dimly glowing runestones. She breathed against them, and the furthest stone in the magazine shone with a purple brilliance. Cocking the wooden stock of the thing against her shoulder, she aimed the barrel icily across the hilltop until the sight of the weapon landed square over the image of the distracted feline. A creasing of her brow, and with no hesitance whatsoever, the weathered mare whispered into the mystical aura of the runestones. "Hurt him!" The bracelet of horns on her right arm flickered. Thunder roared across the dead landscape as a mana bullet flew solidly, and the cougar's body fell flat into a crater of snow, moving no longer. I have eaten meat. I have killed animals and consumed their flesh. I know that these teeth of mine were not granted to me by the goddess for partaking in anything other than plants and herbs. I know that I was born with hooves instead of claws. I know that every book of law ever written by any society in history of ponydom can now brand me as a savage and an outlaw. But I also know that I do what I do because the only goddess that have ever existed are now dead, and I am not. And being alive has always meant, and shall always mean, doing so at the behest of other things that try to live. In the past, I could afford to overlook what I now know to be the gritty reality. Because resources were in abundance, civilization afforded me the ability to exist above the ranks of a common animal. But I also know that, to preserve any scant trace that some civilization, I must preserve myself by any means necessary. To climb so high, I must fall so low. These are paradoxes that only I have to contend with. Though it makes me wonder, if every pony who died could magically come back to life and see me eating meat in desperation for protein, would they be proud of me on account of all of my logical excuses? Would they grant me pardon, even when they discovered that eating meat has been the least of my transgressions? She covered the last few centimeters with a burning sweep of her blowtorch. Finally, after slicing the last sliver into the metal door, she cut the torch and pressed her entire weight into the entrance frame of a large marble building in the center of the ruined Stalingrad. Grunting and sweating with her effort, she finally succeeded, her lithe muscles managing to rip the door off its foundation. A large clanging noise, and a heap of ash lifted and spewed forth across the atrium of the unsealed building. Not expecting that much dust, she coughed and raised a leather mask over her snout, just in time to shield herself against a rustic stench rising dreadfully from the interior. Sparking the light on in her yoked lanterns, she trotted slowly into the domed building that was only briefly overcome by a melancholic discovery of what lay inside. The Pegasus counted 10, 15, 25, at least 35 bodies. It was a veritable pile of corpses, most of adult stature, some the sizes of young foals, and they all formed a circle around a bronze altar in the shape of Princess Celestia. This was Stalingrad's Temple of the Sun, and a good chunk of the neighboring populace had apparently flocked there in a desperate prayer the very moment that the cataclysm had hit. The bodies were well preserved, right down to their dress pieces and horseshoes. But it wasn't the metal of the shoes the last pony had interest in. It was the unicorns themselves. Sighing a breath, she sauntered towards the closest body towards her, the first two dozen salvageable skeletons just like it. Flicking the metal band on her left hoof, she produced a tiny razor-toothed blade and began sawing with expert precision at the top of the skull, severing the dead unicorn's horn from its cranium. An hour or so later, the Pegasus trotted out of the Temple of the Sun and towards the center of Stalingrad, where the Harmony was parked. She had hanging from her neck a bag filled to the brim with severed horns. Stepping on board her airship, she immediately went to her workbench. She produced a strip of tanned cougar leather. Then she emptied the contents of the bag before her and began stitching together a brand new bracelet of unicorn horns. When the sun and the moon disappeared, so did every pony but me. What rendered all of my species to ash and dust, yet spared myself, I still to this day cannot fathom. But whatever it was, it too brought the end of Princess Celestia and Luna. Somehow, that meant the magic that bonded them to the galactic elements was severed, and as a result I now hover above a dead carcass of a world, starved of the pools of mana that once animated it. But magic is a lot like normal mass and energy. It cannot come from nothing, and likewise cannot become nothing. The magic had to go somewhere, and with every pony in Equestria dead, the world's magic had to collect around the one equine who was an exception, me. Long ago, I learned that I could perform very minor magic spells, like the ones I learned in the books I collected. But I could not perform the spells very well, no matter how hard I concentrated. Even with all of the magic in the known universe, I wouldn't be able to do much. It is because I'm a Pegasus, and much like an earth pony, my body is mostly inert in the realm of sorcery. But the unicorns, they were naturally gifted with being living magic batteries. They could master all forms of enchantment, and when they called upon the holy power of Celestia and the other goddesses like her, they could even perform supernatural feats that rivaled the creation of Equestria itself. The matter in the horns was a substance of their mystical talent, and even beyond death the cyclical bone structure still acts as a conduit for magical energies. My guess is when the unicorns died during the cataclysm, a piece of their life essence, the magical part, was retained in their horns. Though I am a Pegasus, fashioning a bracelet out of unicorn horns has provided me with a way to cheat the rules of magic, so long as I am the last pony left to act as a gateway between the physical realm and beyond. With so many horns contained in one place, I can focus a magic spell through them, and perform all sorts of helpful tricks to assist me in my sojourns through the wastes. Though I cannot harness enough energy to levitate or transmogrify matter, the power granted me by these savage buffers have been immeasurably useful in finding, hoarding, and killing whatever the wasteland randomly tosses my way. But as grim a necessity as the bracelets are, I do not rely on dead bones alone. In the hangar of the Harmony, the pony leaned over an alchemy table full of bubbling glass jars and glowing vials of smoking liquid. Wearing a chemist's pair of wide-lensed glasses, the last pony finished carving a chunk of white moonstone into an arcane shape. Filing away the last jagged chips from the edges of the stone, she lifted the thing in a pair of forceps and dipped them into one steaming beaker after another. Smoke of various shades filled the hangar in a mystic smog as she then cooled the stone off in a trough of water and sprinkled herbs over it. Gazing into a tome, the pony chanted a few archaic words in deep monotone. A glittering aura shone from the bracelet of horns on her right hoof, and the stone within the trough began glowing. After several minutes, the filly removed the cooled stone from its trough. Staring at the glowing shard closely, she raised an eyebrow and experimentally stuck the letter-shaped chunk of enchanted moonrock into the matching hole in a square black tablet. She then stuck the tablet into the top piece of a magazine filled with identically crafted stones before finally loading the whole ensemble into her copper rifle. Cocking the weapon, she removed her glasses and marched towards the circular aperture of the Harmony and manually opened it. A flurry of cold wind and the pony aimed the glowing rifle out into the snowy overcast of the equestrian sky. Her lips moved icily. "Mwinram!" Her bracelet strobed yet again. The freshly crafted runestone burst in a crimson glow, and a bright red mana bullet rocketed down the length of the brass barrel and flew deep into a cloud bank. Half a second later, a gigantic explosion of burning red plasma consumed 1/2 square kilometer of misty sky, briefly lighting the dead twilight in a frothing haze, until all was once more ash and soot. The pony steadied herself as the entire 2-level gondola of the Harmony rocked and swayed from the explosion. A whistle escaped her lips, and she patted the rifle with a meager affection before returning back to her alchemy table. Runestones. They are the centerpiece of a long-forgotten art of magic, with emphasis on mineral infusion and verbal enchantment. The school of sorcery is almost as old as celestial alchemy, though it was always served far less benevolent functions. The last time runestones were used, much less crafted, was in wartime, long ago, towards the end of the Second Age, when Nightmare Moon turned traitorous and led the armies of the Lunar Republic in a violent attempt to overthrow her sister Celestia. War horses marched into battle, bolstering explosives and ballistics armed with runestones as their triggers. It was a strange and archaic time when focused mysticism was used almost entirely for bloodshed, unlike the subtler schools of Cantaladian mysticism taught during the peaceful millennium that followed the war, otherwise known as the Third Age, the age I was born in. This was to be the Fourth Age, the age of Princess Luna's redemption. This was to be the age when the twin goddesses oversaw the revolutions of the sun and moon, as they were naturally born to do. The Fourth Age barely lasted one pathetic year, or so I assume. I vaguely remember one winter wrap-up, maybe two, before the cataclysm happened. Everything that made up the Fourth Age, including the inane necessity to chronicle the Fourth Age to begin with, was consumed in fire. How ironic it is, then, that I was fated to stumble upon a book in the ruins of the royal palace explaining the intricacies of the forbidden art of runestones, and that I adopted its practice for my own use, archaic words of the lunar tongue and all, with an abundance of moon rocks strewn across the waste at my very disposal. Perhaps there is a prophecy that foretells this, that speaks of an era when one pony resurrects the elements of a great war that threatened to kill all ponies, only to use them in an age meant to bless all ponies. But in all the books that I have scrounged up and read, I found no such scripture that hints of this apocalypse, of this lonely twilight, of this gray forever after that dwarfs the brief and anticlimactic return of Princess Luna. The fact is, I don't need prophecy to explain this dead world to me. I only need to open my eyes, to breathe through with my own nostrils, and make do with what I have given to me, in flesh or in text. I am the end of ponies. I am the Fourth Age. Under the cadence of Octavia's strings, the Pegasus sat at her workbench where she polished several multicolored stones, one after another. There were 7 stones total, magnificent translucent gems that shimmered from the distant boiler's burning light refracting prismatically through them. Red, orange, yellow, blue, green, indigo, and violet. They gleamed after each polish the pony gave them, rubbing them with a felt cloth made out of shaved mane hair. After making each of the immaculate stones sparkling clean, the mare turned her attention towards a lead box lying securely in a shelf just above the corner of the workbench. Placing her cloth down, she reached a hoof over and dragged the lead box towards her. Narrowing her eyes cautiously, she opened the container, bathing herself and the rest of the cabin in a bright red glow. A crimson flamestone shimmered from its holding inside the box. As bright as the thing was, it could have been brighter. The aging mare knew this, and she frowned. Still, she sighed away her disconcerted thoughts and closed the box before swiveling from her workbench and leaping towards the cockpit. Climbing into the seat, she lowered her goggles and disengaged the autopilot. Eyeing the puttering steam-powered gauges of her dashboard, she made an instinctual judgment of her location and pulled several levers and chain-linked handles, dropping the Harmony into a deep descent and angling her towards a wide plateau stretching beyond the gray mist below. In the center of the plateau there was a pony-made structure, a circle of iron-wrought barricades, and in the apex of the circle there rested a thick metal brace for the signal. What is my purpose? I ask myself that in every journal entry I make, which is likely why I rarely go back and reread them, because there is no answer, only the question, otherwise why would I still be here? Why did the cataclysm kill off every pony, yet I was spared? Why were the beautiful equine of this world destroyed, and yet the uglier and more despicable creatures allowed to fester onward into eternity? Why am I struggling so hard to stay alive day by day? Why has anything ever lived, against all the odds of doing so, day after day in the great history of the world? Why do I kill creatures and turn their hides in for profit? Why do I chop mushrooms to make stew and slay animals to cook meat? Why do I hunt down sacred phoenixes and sell them to double-crossing dirigible dogs? Why do I pilfer from Philadelphian skyscrapers and rob from Stalingrad tombs? Why do I harness magic that isn't mine to toy with, or fashion deadly weapons to carry with me into the ruthless abyss every waking moment? How is it that I came to teach myself to read and write, to appreciate Octavia's music, or to build myself an airship when there was no pony to tell me how to weld steel, or to harness steam, or to even fly with my own naked wings? For I was that young when this all started. Is it enough that I struggle for existence sake? There are times when I have believed so, but I've come to label such moments as defeats. It can't possibly be called a victory when I give in to nihilism that mirrors the opaque cloudscape that has constantly surrounded me these last 2 decades. I wrote before that, on some level, I can relate to Princess Celestia, and for all of her many reasons to lament the lonely immortality of her existence, Celestia was somehow convinced to see the silver lining in things, so much so that it constituted the majority of her own personal journal entries. If Princess Celestia, the one and only pony responsible for bringing the sun to this world, could find a reason to be optimistic, then that means that I, the last pony of Equestria, must also discover her reason to be hopeful and to focus on it. Who knows? I too may find many silver lining. There certainly are enough friggin' clouds for that, at least. The Harmony was moored to the circle of rusted iron barricades, but at a 10-meter distance. Tethered by several thick chains hammered hard into the stony floor of the wide-grade plateau, the airship drifted gently over the pony's shaved mane as the mare slid a heavy metal lattice into position, locking it into the thick iron brace at the center of the barricades. Not wasting a sweating second, the brown filly reached into her saddlebag and produced all 7 of the multicolored stones. Pulling a canvas tarp off the metal lattice, she exposed 7 large spotlights to the gray, ashen air. One by one, she slid open the lattices to the spotlights and dropped the colored stones in, from red to green to violet and everything in between. Finally, she slid open a brass compartment at the base of the metal lattice. Into this, she deposited the glowing red flamestone, shutting it tight with a metal clang. On the outside of the compartment was space for a runestone, which she aptly filled with shimmering moon rock. The mare next paced around the lattice and rotated it until the lights were aimed directly skyward. After a few precise tilts, with the ease of rotating valves and gear meters, she achieved the precise angle she traditionally desired. She lowered her lips towards the compartment with the glowing rune, and raised her hoof at the ready. For a moment she lingered, as if in solemn contemplation of an ongoing habit that was suddenly clouded by the gently falling snow settling around her. But she shook this off, lowered her goggles protectively over her scarlet eyes, and thrown it authoritatively into the runestone. "Ener!" The rune's glow dissipated, and a bright ghostly fire billowed from within the embroiled compartment of the lattice. The Pegasus wrapped a hoof around a rusted metal lever and yanked at it. The lights flickered and sputtered and died. Cursing under her breath, the pony yanked and yanked and yanked again, grunting harder with each effort, until the last swing of the lever connected. The enchanted flamestone burst through a series of built-in prisms until they connected with the lens compartments. The 7 multicolored rocks sparkled, glittered, and lit up. In a frothing hiss, the 7 colors of the rainbow surged upwards and pierced the gray, soupy sky, burning through the clouds, and impaling the twilight ceiling of Equestria with a miraculous color and life. A prismatic beacon. The signal. Every pony's signal. Her signal. She took a deep breath, gazing up at the solid beam of artificial spectrum. It was dimmer than the last 2 times she had ignited the signal, as the flamestone was jaded and needed to be replaced with one containing a stronger enchantment. But somehow, less bright or not, the signal was worth the trip, worth the fuel to get there, worth the silver strips earned through scavenging to supply it, worth the restless, lonely nights of self-doubt, just to see it. The last pony took a deep breath, stared at the grand burning links of the conjured rainbow, and then closed her eyes in order to savor the frozen image as she stood there half naked against the cold wasteland winds. There was a time when I used to dream in color. I've read books where literary ponies philosophized over the nature of dreams, and that they were all in black and white. Perhaps in another lifetime that would be true, but that's not the case for me. My life is in black and white. It has been for forever. But when I dream, I live in the past. And the past was something of color, of warmth, of so many amazing and interesting shades that most of them are now eternally lost to me. There was a time of rainbows, when magic was a nature unto the world, not a resource for a scavenger to exploit. Rainbows existed in a time of prosperity, when there would be a promise of another day with similar blessings, and even more to be had. Rainbows were a sign of hope, of delightful and optimistic expectations for the good things in life granted naturally to every pony. If it weren't for hope, why would ponies dream to begin with? In this world of ash and twilight, there are no rainbows. There is no hope. Perhaps that is why ages ago I concocted the idea of the signal, the artificial rainbow. It is because I believed that the only place left for rainbows to go was in the world of dreams. And if I could mimic that, if I could capture an essence of that in a bottle, with the best of intentions, I could provide a shining beacon for every living soul in Equestria to see. And if there is even one single pony besides me left in the world, that would have to be a pony that dreams, like I dream, every day, that this is not all that there is, that there is a reason for why my fitful slumbers conjure up shades that contrast the endless gray of this nightmarish land, that there is more to life than a single piece of meat with 4 hooves trying to scrape up a pitiful existence, that I am not the end of ponies. This is why I can do what I do every day. This is why I exist to do more than existing. It's to produce this signal, to fire this beacon into the dead sky, to constantly beckon and wait for another equestrian soul besides mine to come and find me, even if beyond the grave, for death has been defeated before during multiple miracles of the first, second, and third age. And maybe, just maybe, some pony, any pony, can come join me, and we can all be the 4th age. We can begin things again. We can begin things again. We can. Several hours passed, during which the lonely beacon of rainbow light started to dim and flicker into a dull pale beam. The pony sat, hunched over, in a chair positioned atop a 6-meter tall tower that flanked the circle of metal barricades and the glowing lattices in the center of them. The copper body of the dirigible Harmony hovered overhead, aglow in the dying rainbow's penumbra. Snow fluttered through the soft air, insulating everything in a deathly silence. The Pegasus lingered upon the precipice of consciousness, her hooves kicked up over the railed edge of the tower. Her brown-coated body rose and fell in gentle breaths as her head bowed towards her chest. The goggles fogged over with lazy condensation. Moisture beaded off the barrel of the brass rifle propped to her side. The magazine full of glowing runestones twinkled restlessly. After yet another long stretch of silence, a ringing noise filled the naked air. Silence. Then another shrill ringing, and the Pegasus started, nearly pratfalling out of her seat. Snorting to blinking wakefulness, she wiped the sheen from her goggles and leaned forward, peering across the gray links of the plateau. A dangling string was bouncing from where it stretched out from the rusted stake pounded into the rocky ground. Ages ago, the pony had erected a complex web of cords and yarn in a spiraling formation from the epicenter of the barricaded signal location. These cords were equipped with custom-made cowbells at every 3-meter interval, all built to alert the pony of any incoming body of 4 limbs. Right before her, the one ringing noise was joined by several identical clanging sounds, so that she was swiftly engulfed in a cacophony of bedlam zeroing in on her location. Her pulse raced. With shaking hooves, she raised her goggles, reached back, grabbed a spyglass from her saddlebag, and peered down the extended length of it. Through the dim porthole of light, the pony stared across the mist-laden horizon of the stony plateau. The projected image bobbed and bounced with each throb of her lonely heartbeat. Then, out of the shadows, she saw them. Shapes. Bodies. But not colorfully maned and hooved. Instead leathery and sharp-fanged. Bounding towards her on all 4s by the dozen. A whooping noise filled the air as a pack of mangy, ink-dark creatures stampeded homicidally towards her elevated location. "Crud!" she hissed. Grabbing her rifle, she pounded off the tower, grabbed a dangling chain tethering the Harmony to the earth, and slid agilely down the length of it. Yanking hard on all the chains, she unhooked them from the airship's clasp above, then scampered over to the lattice where she hastily retrieved the 7-colored rocks in the now dim flamestone. The earthen plateau beneath her shook fiercely, the rusted iron barricades rattling from the angry feet of the bloodthirsty marauders. Wasting no time, the pony mightily shouldered the weight of the hulking metal lattice on her back, clasped the rifle in an angry pair of teeth, and stretched her wings out, beating them ferociously against the combination of snowy air and ruthless gravity. She somehow managed to lift the entire ensemble, herself included. The Pegasus levitated upwards just as the howling and drooling bodies hurtled their way over the first barricades and pounced at her. Fanged teeth and razor-sharp maws snapped just centimeters beneath her dangling hooves as she desperately hovered her arching body upwards, climbed the last few meters between her and the airship, and finally collapsed, sprawling, at the aperture entrance of the Harmony's hangar. From there she cocked her rifle and aimed it cautiously down at the leaping, braying creatures. They leered and spat at her, their eyes like beady, soulless specks that reflected the gray twilight. As they watched their crafty prey rise ever so far away from the stone face of the plateau, they spun back into a slithering mass of herding leather and thundering, howling, into the blanketing mists where they joined the ghostly hum of the dead equestrian wastes. The Pegasus took a long, deep breath and leaned back against the round entrance of her airship, shutting her eyes and struggling to fight an impervious frown chiseled into her disappointed face. Trolls. Goddess, I hate them. It figures that when all the ponies disappeared from the face of the earth, these soulless beasts crawled out from the woodwork, no longer forced to hide under bridges and dank cave roofs, waiting for unsuspecting victims or passerbys. More times in the wasteland than I can count, I've had to deal with them. They track one's scent from miles away. So I did away with the most fragrant part of any exposed pony, her hair. They're attracted to a wood-kindled flame, so I switched to using gas lanterns in all my flashlights. They stampede at cheetah speed, so I never wear extra armor when I'm trotting across the equestrian plains, so that I can fly away at the drop of a hat. But what I hate about them the most, what makes me wish that the cataclysm had wiped them off the face of the earth instead, is that the last 3 consecutive times that I lit the signal, it was them who I attracted, and for the briefest moments every time my naive heart had leaped at the thought that the herd I called was the one herd I was always looking for. And every one of those times I was severely disappointed, and rightfully so. What more can I expect? There are so many ghostly creatures left haunting this world, from dogs to goblins to trolls to harpies, and almost every one of them has wanted me dead at one time or another. Many of them blame ponydom for the great blight that has befallen the land, never mind the fact that it took the whole of ponydom with it in the process. Many see me as a delicacy, an exotic edible, or a future museum curiosity at best. The closest thing I have for allies are the soulless mercenaries who only need me for my talents, or begrudgingly register my existence at an exchange of silver strips over a bargaining table stained with dirty blood. It's when I go through the process of disembarking from the signal that my faith is lowest, that the artificial rainbow dies and I wake up once more in the monochromatic singularity of my existence. What is there to hope for in a world where I am the only source of that hope? There's a name for living within the repetitive prison of your own making, and that's called insanity. These slobbering trolls, these creatures of the night that seek to rend me to ribbons, they are the same ones. Only a monster who embraces the savage wilderness of eternal twilight has any reason to hope for things in this world. They will last longer. They will leave a deeper imprint, not by shining fake rainbows into cloudy air, but by raking the earth with claws of their nefarious passion, and soaking it with the blood of their enemies, as every civilization has done, including my own in ages past. I've been raised, delightfully sprinkled and polluted, with notions of peace, of tolerance, of friendship. All of those values would have worked once, in a lifetime before I had to kill things to survive and make excuses for it afterward. Maybe someday, maybe in a future journal entry, I will realize that the one burning truth of who and what I am, that I cannot pretend to be friendly or hopeful in a world where every pony is gone. Just look at what I'm writing. Every pony. Over 2,000 journal entries into this nonsense, and I really shouldn't bother to write that anymore. From now on, I think I should just chicken scratch the term everybody. for that is all that is left in the graveyard of Equestria, bodies, and I am their gravekeeper for as long as I live to absurdly shine rainbows into the abyss. End of entry.